Namaskar. In today's satsang, we are going to talk about two very diverse things. One comes from the West, predominantly the modern West. West, as in when we use the term West, it's not just a geography, but it just means developed nations where a lot of research is happening, a lot of development in science and industry has happened. So, one aspect comes from the West, and the other aspect comes from traditions from the East. When I was growing up as a child, my grandmother would say, habits make me do this. What am I to do? It obviously she wouldn't speak it in English. There was a Bengali terminology for this, Bengali kind of phrase which she would use, Obhashe koraye kormo amar ki dosh, which really translates to, it's the habits which make me do these things. Wow, what can I do? I am helpless. You know, so what she was trying to do is that we are helpless in front of our habits, or we are committed to our habits. We really can't help it. Now, this was said mostly whenever she would do something which she felt should not be done. Where there was some question of it had a kind of negative connotation that, oh, I did this, it's a mistake, but what to do? How can I help it? It's my habit. Now, on the other hand, when we are talking about Karmyog for 21st Century's Fit for Life program, this particular program itself, which we are all so diligently trying to be committed towards, we have said that it needs 3 hours of commitment every day. So it's not a mean commitment. It's not just that you do something just like that. So all of this commitment is also about forming habits, because sadhana paddhati, or inculcating a daily routine to really influence your operating system of your life, is something that is about forming habits. So these habits are not essentially something that we need to be apologetic about. So we will say that, oh, habits is making me do this, I am helpless. Not just that. The core is that we are trying to inculcate all kinds of habits, because sadhana makes habits happen. Things become a habit. So what is this habit? Well, there is a term that is used very often, especially traditionally, in India, in almost a lot of languages. As you know, India has many languages. It's not a monolingual country. It's a multilingual country. There's a lot of diversity in linguistic diversity. But in most Indian languages, there is a word that is used called Sanskaar. In English also, this word is now being absorbed. Samskara is it called. There is a English movie that was made which was called Samsara. So samsara is different and sanskar is different. Very often people confuse these terms in English. Samsara is family. Sangsar, actually in Sanskrit that is called sangsar. In English it's written as samsara, Samsara, samsara. In Sanskrit it is called sangsar. Whereas there is another variation of that which is called sanskar. Sanskar, Sanskara, sanskar. So sanskar really is very close to habit. We say, just like we say that, as a parent or as a teacher, you would want to provide, you want to gift your children or your students good habits, beautiful habits. In the same way, traditionally in India, people say that as a parent or as a guru, you should be aiming to gift your children, to gift your students good habits. That's the best gift that you can gift to your children or your students, is how teachers and gurus and instructors and parents are advised. Traditionally, this has been the advice. Now, what is this sanskar and habit? Sanskar is a little different from habit, fine-tuned different, but more or less close relatives, close siblings. Sanskar, habit. Now, what is the connection with something as traditional as sanskar with something as modern as neuroscience? That's the topic that we are going to discuss in today's satsang. We're going to discuss means we've already spent 5 minutes. The satsang is generally something between 10 to 15 minutes every day. This follows our practice. Our practice is followed by this conversation, this discussion, of course, in which it starts with a monologue. I am just presenting something to you. The idea is that you will actually use this as a springboard and indulge in communicating back, giving your feedback, your thoughts, think about it, etc. So that's how it's a sangvad, it's a discussion. It's not the end of it, that this 10-15 minutes done and I have said everything, that's the end of it. No, it's not like that. It's just an opening remark. Whatever I say is just the opening remarks. Now, this sangvad or this discussion, we're going to focus on the relationship between neuroscience and sanskara, or habits and brains. So, before we get there, there's another question that we need to ask ourselves, a very simple question, a very obvious one. But, by my guru Ken Wilber used to say something which is very profound. He would say, when something is so very obvious and yet, we try to go deep within it, he would say, oh, it was so obvious that it took me 20 years to just think about it. So it's so obvious that it took me 20 years to think about it. So that's many things like that are so obvious. The question that I'm going to pose to you now is one such thing. It's so obvious that it might have taken you 20 lifetimes to come to that question. At least it took me, I don't know how many lifetimes to just arrive at that question. And the question is, well, we all know we think. Throughout the day, our mind is engaged in thinking. We think, right? Now, thinking is not just thinking about deep things and all that. Thinking is everything. We are learning tables, multiplication tables and maths. It's about thinking. Maths is about thinking. All our student life, we've been made to think, right? Most of it was mental work. So, thinking. When we are studying, we are thinking. If we are planning something, we have to build a house, we are thinking. All the time, we are thinking. So, the mind is engaged in thinking, right? Common thing. Thus far, nothing new. The question is, why do we think? And that's why I said it's such an obvious question that we don't ask this question to ourselves. But if we don't ask such obvious kind of questions to our own selves and don't spend time delving into the answers for those questions, then we wouldn't have an introduction to our own selves. And self-realization and all those kind of things that are mentioned in spiritual kind of quests would go nowhere until and unless you start asking these obvious kind of questions. So the question is, why do we think? Well, the answer that I have got through my own thinking and through my study and research and discussions and what I've heard others say from all other sources and including my own thought process in this is that we think so that we can stop thinking. Well, let's try and understand that. We think so that we don't have to think. Why so? It sounds kind of confusing, but just let's understand that. Why did our teachers make us learn the multiplication tables? 13 twos are 26. 13 threes are 39. Why did he make us think about it so much, repeat it, memorize it, put it into memory in the mind? Why did he make our mind do such a lot of work around the multiplication tables? So that later on, when I'm asked 13 twos are 26, it is by heart. In Indian languages, it's called kanthast, means by throat actually. In English, we say by heart. Kanthast is by throat, means as soon as you are asked, your throat will throw out the answer without involving the mind. You can answer the question with your throat, not the mind. That's the goal of thinking. Think about driving a car. When you're learning how to drive a car, then you're putting all your thoughts into it. The gear, the clutch, the accelerator. Of course, now all that is going to go with automated driverless cars. But I don't know how long this example will be relevant. But as long as it is, as long as we know what driving a car means, well, we are thinking about driving a car. When we are learning, all our thoughts in it. If we miss something, if our thought goes somewhere, if we engage our mind in something other than the driving of the car, then we're going to press the accelerator instead of the brake and there'll be an accident, etc. and so on. So we are thinking only about it so that when we get the driving license, when we are driving later on, then we don't have to think. We can do that act, press the brake when we have to without thinking. Our legs will do the braking, not our mind. Our legs, feet will do the acceleration or the gear change, not our mind. Of course, in Western countries, modern countries, gear change is kind of already a strange term. In India, we still have the manual gears, which in most of the cars, but of course, you don't have in the West many such cars with manual gears. But let's say, just as a segue, I mentioned this. But the point is that we learn all that so we don't have to think about it. That's so for everything. In everything that you are trying to put your mind into, it's the objective is so that you can put your mind into such a level so later on it becomes gut feel. You can do it without thinking. Your gut does it, your body does it without involving your mind. So that's really the goal of all thinking. Well, if you see what happens let's come to brain function and the latest studies. And in the last 20-30 years, there's been an explosion in the research around the brain, in the neurosciences. So now let's connect neuroscience with all this. This is habit formation. So when to brake, when to accelerate, what to say when someone says 13 times 2 is all habit. We want these to become habits. So whenever that stimulus comes, the response is by habit. That is sanskar. That is what is being called sanskar. If we see an image of the divine in any form, the sanskar is that we will fold our hands, we will do that asana, we will bow our heads, we will surrender, and we will bring in a feeling of bhakti as in devotion. So devotion and surrender will arise as an automated response, sanskar. So see a divine form, murti, an idol, become devoted and surrendered for that little small bit of time. So bring up that. So that is a sanskar that has been kind of pushed upon us by our rishis and munis, the thought leaders of yesteryears. They have devised that design so that to build a sanskar within us. So there are numerous such sanskars. But what happens when that happens, when this is happening physiologically in our brain? Well, brain research now says that what is actually happening is that in our neural network, in the nervous system, in that whole jumble of nerves which makes up our brains, the circuit is getting rewired. So to say, the brain circuitry is actually changing. Every time we learn something, we are by-hearting something. When we have done 13 times 2, 26, actually a brain has got a little rewired. So the brain rewiring, the brain circuitry formation is what is going on. So one of the results or one of the objectives of the entire sadhana, the sadhana paddhati or the process of forming a daily routine to practice on a daily basis, things that we do to really work on the operating system of our life, is to rewire our brain so that next time there is a stimulus, automatically without putting our thoughts, we will respond in a slightly better way, in a slightly rewired way. That is the objective of the sadhana. Now, spiritual practitioners would say that, don't have to think about your body and all that. And physical practitioners or physical trainers would take you away from spirituality. But the point is that there is nothing that you can do where all these dimensions are not playing simultaneously. And that's why in Karma Yoga for 21st century, in this Fit for Life program, we always talk about Tan Prana Mani Chitta, physical, energetic, mental, spiritual. So we cannot take one away from the other we cannot reduce all of it to one dimension without a remainder being there in the other. So there is no reductionism that is possible here. We have to understand that at the same time, when traditionalists have talked about sanskar in a kind of spiritual tone, and today brain scientists are talking about rewiring of the brain in a more medical tone, they are actually talking about the same thing, two aspects of our own being. And unless we understand this, we are not going to go anywhere with our sadhana. So that's what I wanted to point to today. Hope this will help you fine-tune your your practices, this pragya or this wisdom will help you fine tune and get more out of the time that you're giving to your practices. That's all for today, folks. Take it easy and take care. Namaskar.